Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gomez, spectrum is a valuable resource that supports innovations such as 5G communications, smart devices in our homes, as we discussed yesterday. And thank you very much for making the time. Appreciate that. Spectrum also has to be shared between federal agencies and the private sector to meet all the various needs that exist. We've been working on legislation to modernize the Spectrum Relocation Fund, both to promote science-based research, but also to protect users from harmful interference, and really just to improve our decision-making around spectrum in all manner of decisions. Experts from around the country and across academia suggest that the Spectrum Relocation Fund should be reformed, rebuilt. So what incentives do you believe federal agencies need to share or reallocate spectrum to support the growth of innovations, really?
Thank you for that question, and it was wonderful to speak with you as well. I know you were very busy yesterday, so the time that you took was precious to me.
We ended up talking in the hall,
Yeah, well,
unfortunately, by me being late from one thing and late to another. Thank you.
Absolutely. As you note, it's getting more and more challenging to identify spectrum for new uses. And finding ways to incentivize incumbents to study ways that maybe we can repurpose or share spectrum is very important. I would commend any efforts to update the Spectrum Relocation Fund. In particular, one of the areas that I think we could help incentivize the agencies is currently they are only permitted to recover the cost for comparable capabilities for their systems. Imagine if you were told that you have a 30-year-old system and you can only get a system that has the same capabilities from 30 years ago. That is one area that I think Congress could really help in providing additional incentives for incumbents to study their particular systems for possible repurposing.
Absolutely, and that's a great and very stark example. And using that segue, I'll go to Mr. Starks. The FCC has already taken several steps to ban suspect equipment made by Huawei or ZTE from being purchased. However, the rip and replace program faces in the neighborhood of a $3 billion shortfall. This means that the small carriers, almost always in rural areas, can only be reimbursed at literally less than half of what they spent in terms of when they remove this and what they get, what the compensation totals. Carriers can either choose to continue operating on aging networks with insecure equipment, or they can shut down parts of their networks, especially in situations where there are issues around wildfires or hurricane, extreme weather. So, Commissioner Sparks, what are the consequences for networks in rural communities if the program shortfall isn't fixed quickly?
Yes, thank you so much for the question, Senator. Thank you for your leadership here. This goes back to one of the issues that I started with in 2019, find it, fix it, fund it, where identifying insecure Huawei and ZTE equipment, ripping it out, and then replacing it, the remediation process. But as you pointed out, we have nearly a $3 billion shortfall. If we don't fund this, you're going to have many of those small carriers who are going to have to make that very difficult decision to either leave it in their networks, which still obviously has very much the national security risk that we're talking about. Many of these are also somewhere around around military installations. The other option would be, as you mentioned, that they would have to take this on their own. At nearly 40 cents a dollar, we would end up paying them. And so ultimately, I think that would harm consumers. With many of these small rural carriers, they don't have funds in order to be able to do that. They'd either have to shut down, which would leave some of these rural areas without a service. I think it is imperative, and the legislation that you have advanced along with Senator Fisher, I think is very well done. It has my strong support.
I appreciate that. Flattery will get you everywhere. I'm out of time. I will submit written to Commissioner Carr. I had a question for you on the, looking at skilled workforce. How, I know you've done a lot of work on that. Would look forward to your response on that. And Ms. Danilin, again, you were going to get a question on guiding principles. You will still get it, but you'll have to write the response. Thank you very much. I yield back.